Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Joint Assembly. First item on the agenda is for the election of chairperson for the municipal year. So could I ask for nominations for that role, please? Councillor Bearpark?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to nominate Tim Bick as chair, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'd like to second.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Can I ask for all those in favour? Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Then Councillor Bick is duly appointed the chairperson of the Joint Assembly for this municipal year.
Thank you very much for that support. Must go straight to the next item of election, and that is for the Vice Chair. Could I ask for nominations for Vice Chair of the Assembly, please? Councillor Smith.
I propose Councillor Katie Thornborough.
Thank you, Councillor Katie Thornborough. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
It's Councillor Daunton. Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations? No? If that is the case, then can we see hands in favour of Katie? Thank you. Katie, please join me. It's a bit lonely up here at the moment. Full table. Whilst Katie's doing that, can I welcome everyone to the meeting? Seems an awful long time ago that we last met. We've had lots of elections since then, and we've had a summer. So I hope that everyone enjoyed their summer and is making the most of the results of all the elections that we've had. So I'm going to go back to the agenda now and ask whether we have had apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Graham Wilson and Christopher Walkinshaw.
Thank you. Are there any others? No. So just those two. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, the normal opportunity to declare any interests, or if you prefer to leave that until the item we come to it. Okay, there will be opportunity when we come to individual items. Bringing us to item 5, the minutes of previous meetings, and we have asked members of the Assembly whether they've had any issues with the accuracy of those, and I'd just like to ask Nick if we know of any.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, it was noted that the date for the minutes to be signed at the bottom of the minutes was the previously scheduled meeting date, so that's been corrected to today's date.
Okay, so everyone has had the opportunity to identify. Can I assume that there are no other points of accuracy? Okay, I ask for approval to sign them, please. Everyone in favour? Thank you. Great. Next item was questions from members of the public, and there are some. Just to give you an indication of where they are, we've had 3 on the Eastern Access item and a member of a partner body also asking to speak on that. We've had 4 on the South East Transport Scheme, and we've had 2 on the Greenways. As we've done in the past, I will call these as we come to the items so that people speak into the debate directly. Petitions. Are there any petitions? I think I've been told no. No one's disagreeing. That's good. Let's move on to the first substantive item then, which is Better Public Transport, Cambridge Eastern Access Project. It's on your agendas, pages 21 to 32. The report is eventually going to be presented by Peter. But first, we are going to deal with the questions from the public. And I'm going to turn to those now. So, the first question, and we have published these, is from James Littlewood from Cambridge, past, present and future. James is not well, I'm told, and his question is going to be asked by Stephen Partridge-Hicks. Mr. Partridge-Hicks, welcome. Could you
Thank you, Chair.
go ahead, please?
So this is on behalf of James,
Sorry,
who's...
Before you start, I just realised I haven't explained what this thing is.
I've been told.
You've been told. So this is green when you start. When you've got 30 seconds left, it goes amber, and when your time's finished, it's red.
Thank you, Chair. This is from James Littlewood, the Chief Executive of Cambridge Past, Present and Future. His question is this: when the location for a new park and ride site was discussed by the Assembly and the Board, one of their main concerns was that site P1 would be very close to the built-up area once the Cambridge Airport is redeveloped. They pointed out that some of the current park and ride locations have been absorbed by the growing city, so that traffic often has to queue to reach them, and that traffic is in the urban area, both of which are undesirable. They highlighted that a lesson learned is to locate future park and ride sites further from the city, so they might have greater longevity. We note the officers have carried out modelling, but it is not clear if they have modelled traffic congestion after the airport site has been built, and the implications of that on the use of the various proposed sites. Please, can you say whether modelling based on future growth has taken place? If not, can you say what the traffic congestion will be to reach the various sites once the airport is fully redeveloped?
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask the other two questioners, and we will ask Peter to respond to each of those in turn afterwards. The second question is from Jenny Conroy. She's online. Okay.
Yeah. Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you, Jenny.
Okay.
So would you like to go ahead?
Sure. So, given the current congestion on the Quay roundabout at peak times, how will relocating the P&R from its current location to site P1 improve access? I'm thinking in particular, of course, for the South Cambs villages to the northeast of the A14 in relation to not only Cambridge City, but also core employment areas, and in particular, the sixth form provision for these villages, which you'll all be aware are right on the other side of Cambridge, Long Road, Hills Road, and Cam Regional College. And further, given the reports of insufficient parking provision at Marley and the dissatisfaction amongst residents there, and what protection will be put in place to prevent residents of neighbouring new housing developments, of course including future developments on Cambridge Airport, using the P&R for semi and or permanent parking? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We will come back to that in a moment when we've had the third question, which is from Josh Grantham from CamCycle.
Thank you, Chair. Josh Grantham, the infrastructure campaigner for CamCycle. We note the lack of progress since the September 2023 Executive Board meeting regarding Phase 3A, Elizabeth Way to the Chisholm Trail, with Section 8.1 of the report merely stating this will happen in due course. This vague timeline is not acceptable, especially when there's a clear need for swift action. Further delays and reliance on emerging policy are not necessary. If the western section of Newmarket Road isn't progressed as quickly as possible, we'll end up with cycle lanes to nowhere, meaning people will still be unable to safely reach shops, the city centre, and many onward journeys. Can you please provide a specific and expedited timeline for the western section of Newmarket Road? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to ask Peter if he would respond to those each in turn.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I hope James gets better soon. I know he's poorly. So when the last time the Assembly considered this report, they wanted additional modelling work to further assess the merits of the alternate locations. And that work has been undertaken, as concluded in the report, and we'll talk about that later. As part of the wider business case development for this scheme, we have assessed transport modelling work for current and future growth, as we are required to do, and we will continue to do that as the scheme goes forward, and that includes growth and the impact of congestion on the location. In terms of Jenny Conroy's question, so this is not a single scheme. There's a wider programme here that we're delivering. So we are looking at wider improvements along Newmarket Road. We are looking at greenways in the locality. And I think in the context of the question of the location of the A14, it's important to recognise that's a national highways road, and improvements to that junction fall under their remit, and we need to be cognizant of that in terms of our decisions. Nevertheless, as part of the further modelling work that you requested, we assess the impact of the alternate locations, and a location north of the A14 places increased pressure on Quay and increased pressure on the interchange. And again, that's reported within the document. Nevertheless, the report also says that following engagement and discussions, we will continue to explore the possibility of a smaller travel hub along the B1102 to complement the main travel hub site, and that work will continue, particularly in light of the Mayor's consultation at the moment on bus reform. Finally, in terms of the question around parking issues on the site itself, and I think that's an understood risk, there are parking enforcement policies that exist on all the park and ride sites, and should the scenario described come to fruition, then clearly those parking enforcement policies would need to be reviewed to make sure that operational management of that site is appropriate to the circumstances. And finally, in terms of Josh Grantham's question, it's not a lack of progress. When we last reported this, we made clear there's a planning context that we need to reflect. And so the major developments on Beehive and Grafton are key decisions for the city, and we should be reflecting them. We should not be running ahead of them. So I make no apologies for adopting that approach. We are working very closely with planning colleagues. I'm getting an echo. Is anybody else getting an echo? We're working very closely with planning colleagues and highways colleagues to bring forward those developments, and we'll continue with that role. In the meantime, we are progressing on the wider section of Newmarket Road, which of course links with the Chisholm Trail, which is one of our highly popular schemes, and so that will avoid any risk of a cycle route to nowhere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter, and the questioners. Sometimes asked, so is that it, as far as the questions are concerned? Of course, the questions have a reaction now from Peter, but they can also be referred to when we have our own debate shortly. So it's up to members if they want to pick up any of these points and raise them later in our discussion. Great. Well, I'm going to now ask Peter to present the overall report. Please, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, it very much picks up on Josh's question. The report focuses on, and forgive me because the terminology we've used has been a bit, needs to be a bit clearer. We are seeking to relocate a park and ride site to a new travel hub location. Because, as we've discussed previously at the Assembly, we think the nature of park and ride needs to evolve to be more wider embracing. So the report is focusing on that, and that's the decision alone. You've previously had this report. You asked us for further work in terms of the modelling issues, in terms of the impact on the highway, in terms of the impact on existing park and ride. And from paragraphs 2.8 to 224 is outlined. The conclusion that the officers draw is that the preferred location remains the preferred location, and that it should progress to the next stage. But let's be clear, this is not a final decision. The next stage is a planning application, and all of the issues and all of the evidence will need to be presented to the planning authority to justify the relocation to this point. And that's the decision that will be put in front of the executive board. So maybe, Chair, I'll stop there and try and answer any questions with my colleague Joe Baker, who's the project manager.
Thank you very much, Peter. I realised I have skipped over something that I should have done. We had, I said, an application from a member of the partner authority to speak on this subject, and that member was Councillor Naomi Bennett from Cambridge City Council, who represents Abbey Ward, obvious relationship to this project. She too, I'm afraid, is indisposed today, so couldn't be here. And I believe, Neil, you've taken on the role of conveying to the Assembly what Councillor Bennett wanted us to hear. So would you like to do that before we get going?
Thank you very much, Chair. I actually will reserve it until we speak as members of the committee. I've spoken to her and also Councillor Boulet and come to some kind of an agreement. So I think it's probably more appropriate that we just wind that in, if you like.
Okay, that sounds fine as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to suggest that we divide this discussion into two pieces. The larger part of the report, it relates to the location of the new travel hub, and I suggest we deal with that first. And so everyone who's got something to say about that, say it at the beginning. And after we've finished with that, then go on to the issues that really Josh Grantham's question touched on, and I think in the report are described as issues related to phase A. And so I have the discussion about the status of the work on that section closest to the city of this project. So travel hub location first. Could I have contributions on that, please? So Heather, Claire, Neil.
Thank you. Just on, if this is probably more of a broader issue, just on how we sort of work with partners and things. Actually, when there's a lot of these, we have local members at the councils, and that could be county or district. Perhaps that's something that we should look at, how we encompass their thoughts and views in our reports and things. I know we do it planning, and that's part of the process as a consultation. But I think, actually, Chair, there was something that came up in your ward at one point, and you hadn't had time to consult with residents and things in relation to down by Tennis Court Road, what I would call on that section there. So perhaps there is just small thought about whether we can give some room in the report to reflect the local members' views, and that might then also help us when engaging with the wider community there. So that's just a bit of a side, just because of the, obviously, Councillor Shaler is going to make comments on behalf of Councillor Bennett, but perhaps we should look to engage in that way more widely. In relation to the site, I've just got a few things which I appreciate the reasons why P1 is being looked at, but it is geographically the closest, and that feels very counterintuitive, because part of what we want to do is to stop people coming into the city. And I know that park and ride in particular, a lot of people lose part of their day trying to get into it, and whether that sort of half a mile to a mile is going to make overly a difference to its appeal is something that is concerning. I appreciate there are restrictions to the A14, but there are other sites south of it, and I think that's still a concern for myself, that the hubs, they only work if people use them, and I don't mean the people that are going to use them anyway. They are already using the service. They will go to where it is. What we need to do, if we're serious about reducing the congestion, particularly in that area of the city, is appeal to people that aren't currently using it. And my fear is just having that slight, because if I'm in the car coming from one of the villages and I've already queued in a lot of traffic to get to this point, and I've only got to get you know, a little bit further on, I'm unlikely to get out the car in that sort of mindset. So that's something. And also, it's been referred to the meeting in September 23. I've actually got that in front of me, and it shows that just over a third, so 34%, supported the expansion and relocation. So we already know from that it's not the most popular thing that we're going to need to do. There are reasons, legitimate reasons why we need to relocate, particularly to the lease. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to relocate, and actually expansion of these facilities is positive. But is it the geographical location that's proposed that is really sort of stopping people getting on board with this? So I think that's my main take from the agenda item, Chair.
Thank you very much, Heather. Claire Daunton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Well, I am one of the local members for this area, so it's something that's very important to me. And first of all, I want to thank the officers for taking forward the additional work on looking again at the other sites. We asked them to do that at the Assembly, and indeed they have done that, and it's quite clear from the report, looking again at all the other sites. So I want to thank the officers for doing that. I've got quite a few comments to make. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I think that if in relation to P1, one of the issues is the access to P1 from the A1303. Will there be a slip road? What will the approach be from that narrowing, from the funneling on the 1303? How is that going to be dealt with? The site is very close to Teversham Village, and I know the officers have engaged with Teversham Parish on this and taken into account the concerns of Teversham. Will there be cycling and walking access from Teversham Village itself? In relation to traffic coming in from the east and the north, it's in the papers, but I'd like to hear a little bit more on the suggestion that there could be an adjunct or an additional smaller travel hub along the 1303 or an area to the north, which would take some of the traffic, obviously smaller, but take some of the traffic off the Quay roundabout. In relation to the park and ride itself, we're talking about a travel hub. What does that mean? Is it going to be a place to serve other bus services? Any new bus services that will come about through the work of the CPCA and potential bus franchising? Will it be possible to have other services run out of the park and ride? I know there's an issue with retail services, but could the travel hub be used for other amenities? Again, it's in the papers. I'd like to hear, I'd like to be reassured on concern, attention to the relocation to P1 and the proximity to the SSSI site of the Wilbraham Fen. And the point that James Littlewood takes up in relation to spaces for parking for people who are not using the park and ride, what can be done to prevent that happening. And finally, the current park and ride is an important facility for the Marley development, and when it moves, or if it moves, that will be a concern for Marley residents, and myself and my district councillor colleagues have raised this. So I would like I'd like reassurance from the officers that that will be taken into account. What will be bus access for Marley residents once the park and ride moves? How will that be dealt with? If there is to be a bus stop on Newmarket Road only, then what crossing facilities will there be? But just, I'd like reassurance that these points will be taken into account at the planning stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Neil, next, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am also a local
area, and as, is it working? As Councillor, it's working now, isn't it? Williams mentioned, we like to work cross-party where we can. And so I did speak to Councillor Bennett and also Councillor Boulette. And the questions really relate to the new park and ride site in three different areas. The main one is the football parking, which is, it exercises us in the area, the very tidal flow of football shopping, parking. The other one is about supermarket and other shopping, and the other one is non-bus accessible destinations within the city. So to start with, the Cambridge United Football Club have done a fan survey on what would encourage more fans to use the park and ride instead of parking in residential streets within a kilometre radius of the stadium. Now, the most obvious one is that the last park and ride bus ends before the midweek evening matches. So something about timing might be quite useful. They've also highlighted the availability of the park and ride toilets. They seem to be closed when the fans return from a match. So again, something to do with the timing, perhaps. Also, a lot of the fans are, of course, from Cambridge. They are locals. And so obviously this is not going to necessarily solve their problem where they actually travel away from the stadium in order to come back. It's kind of counterintuitive, so we may have to think along those lines. Residents have highlighted the idea that they would like to see park and ride sign posted from both Barnwell Road and Ditton Lane as well. And signage is obviously a problem that we have on highways as well, especially diversions. People just don't seem to know where to go. So on supermarket, we were wondering if out-of-town shoppers that might choose to use the park and ride and then come in to do shopping, if there could be a click and collect point for supermarkets at the park and ride. And this is something, they've been diversifying these kind of sites all over the country, and wonder if that's something that we've thought about. In terms of non-bus destinations, people want reassurance that there will be provision for bike and scooter hire, as well as parking facilities at the park and ride. And of course, we want to highlight that every bus stop should be an active travel hub. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Neil. Those three contributions I'm going to ask Peter to comment on, and then we'll see if there are more.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start, and Joe's got some more detailed points. I think we need to take a step back in that when we've discussed park and rides previously, we, which means you, have told me that actually we need to refocus the operation. It shouldn't just be car to bus, yeah? Because that's intuitively, that now just feels wrong given the challenges that we've got. So we are not just looking at catering for people who are driving 20 miles into the edge of Cambridge to get in. You know, the whole concept of what you've asked us to do is to say, we want to link up with cycleways. We want good cycle storage, safe, proper, cycle storage. We want these things lit appropriately. We want greater hours of operation rather than just commuters. And so we come back to Heather's point. This corridor, this planned growth is significant on this corridor. And so we need to manage that growth to reflect not just car-based travel, but also walking and cycling and other modes. The current location is too small. It's too far into the city. It's increasingly a residential area, and we need to reflect that. And operationally, there's a lease on it that is a bit like a sword of Damocles that we need to address if we're not careful. So the location is then a balance of all of those things to say, we do want to continue to cater for car to bus, but actually we want bus to bus, or cycle to bus, or bus to cycle, or car to cycle. And so the location then is determined by those parameters. Putting it 10 or 15 miles out of the city might be very nice to tick the car box, but you're certainly not going to address the others. And I'm just saying this is the dynamic that we've tried to assess in terms of the business case and getting that right. And I think that's what we've tried to do through the process, and absolutely will be challenged by the application, which we expect. We'll take away the point on local members because I think that's a neat idea. We just need to work out how to do that. In terms of the others, I'm going to look to Joe on the on sort of more of the detail. I think there are a number of operational things, Neil, around hours of operation and buses. Where will the buses go and when, that we've got to work through with the responsible agencies. So currently the bus company, but again, my plug for the bus reform consultation. Actually, there may be a different mechanism for delivering bus services going forward. Joe.
Thanks, Peter. So just pick up a few of the points raised. I think there was a question raised about the response to the consultation. We've done a number of consultations on this. The last one was a very different response to previous ones, and I think retrospectively some of the debate and whatever about making connections rather changed the way it was responded to. This site was still by far the most popular of the sites put forward at that consultation, but there was a general no to pretty much everything we said at that consultation, which was in marked contrast to when we talked about very similar propositions a year or two previously. So yes, it was certainly something that we looked at carefully, but there was quite a change, which I hope we would move away from as maybe some of the controversy dies down. And certainly we have and will continue to go out to the likes of parish councils and other communities. I mean, I visited a number of them with Councillor Daunton in the last few months, for example. So we recognise that's really important that we do go out and engage with local members and the parishes and residents, and that will continue. Just picking up some of the technical details. So the issues about linkage to the A1303, a lot of these are points which hopefully, subject to the Executive Board's approval, and we move forward into the planning processes, we will start looking at the detailed, the outline design stage and the planning application. So design issues about junctions, absolutely things we need to be looking at. The whole what is a travel hub issue, absolutely this will not just be a park and ride. We would certainly have connectivity for cycling, walking, things like cycle and scooter hire, depending what the prevailing operations are in the city at the time. Those sort of e-mobility options would definitely be the sorts of things we would imagine coming in. Again, it's very much about what franchises and operations we have at the time. As was alluded to, there's a wider issue about things that are not deemed to be local transport, and that's about planning policy. We know that planning policy is liable to change, particularly with respect to greenbelt designations, so that's something we'll keep close tabs on. It may be that retail remains a difficult thing to put in planning terms, but we will be mindful of those opportunities, and that's something we'll be picking up. And clearly, as we head towards planning, there'll be further consultation around what this finally looks like when we have a bit more detail on the site. Protection from Little Wilburn Fen, absolutely, and that's really one of the key reasons why sites P and 2 and 3 got knocked out. And James Littlewood clearly, regrettably, isn't here, but very helpfully fed into the project very early on, making sure that we were very clearly appraised of the concerns of moving closer to the Fen and the Triple SI, and that's well understood. So that's one of the key reasons why P1, which has rightly been pointed out, is further down the road into town, has been preferred over a site closer to the required change, is simply because of the proximity to the Triple SI, which is one of the many, many constraints that we're trying to look at. In terms of other issues, the idea of the smaller travel hub, that's something which I've spoken to the ATB 1102 group. They're very keen on the idea, and Councillor Dalton's where we talked about that with Quay Parish Council as well. It is dependent on viable bus services. So the key thing about that, I think, is working with the combined authority that as their proposals for bus reform move forward, we try and work with them to gain the opportunity that releases, because we need to have a viable bus service to make a facility like that work. I mean, the sort of one bus an hour or worse that some of the villages unfortunately have at the moment is not going to make a travel hub work. It'll be great for the odd person cycling in, but it won't work for people trying to use public transport. So it's work in progress, but it's very much been noted. And other things like the NMU linkage to the park and ride site from Teversham, that again has been noted in quite a few of these points, and particularly some of the points that also came from Councillor Bennett as well. They'll be forwarded on to the design team to be subject to exec board approval, taken into that process as we move forward. In terms of other points, the link to Marley, clearly the site will be further away. It's still only about 10 to 15 minutes walk and a couple of minutes cycle, so it's not that far. In terms of bus services, there will still be buses on the Newmarket Road, and again, perhaps back to Josh Grantham's point as well, the big picture of Eastern Access was always around the long term about potentially bus connectivity in to avoid the congestion on Newmarket Road. That hasn't gone away, but it is part and parcel of the process of redevelopment of the airport, which, as we know, is not yet allocated and is still dependent on the local plan process. Even when that were to happen at some point in the future, one of the things we've always been clear on is the level of development along the Newmarket Road means we'll always need bus services along Newmarket Road. Whether they penetrate the Marley site is really a matter for both the developer and the planners, because there may be benefits clearly going into the site. That's a disbenefit to operators, and I think that will be an ongoing debate. So it is an important issue. It's one that will be picked up, not necessarily within our gift. It's partly for the combined authorities. They start specifying future transport franchises potentially, and it's also about how the site itself is developed. And to be fair, I'm not totally au fait with the details of any Section 106 for the elements of that site as it goes forward. It's the sort of thing that potentially should and could be in a Section 106 agreement, but that very much sits with the planners rather than ourselves. Any other issues? Yes, so I think the issues around the football certainly noted, and again, it's about working with the football club. There are things that would definitely be beneficial. That may also need to be tied into future Section 106 agreements with them for future growth of the ground, because there's obviously a cost to the public purse for us to change, for example, the way that the toilet's maintained. And it's possible that a large number of football fans using the toilets would need extra cleaning facilities, and that's about making sure that somebody's picking up the tab for it, which is done in many other places and should be done here as well. So I'm sure there's a way of dealing with that. That's a bit of a canter through a lot of the points I've noticed. Is there anything, there was a lot of points raised, is there anything really critical that people feel has been missed? I'm happy to go back to it.
Well, that'll emerge, I think, from further contributions, Joe. So thank you for that. And I was going to take more contributions, including going back to Joe on any of those things. But I've got Katie first, as indicated. Anyone else after Katie, so that we know? Kristen Ann and Claire.
I think it's really important, the question about what is a transport hub, and I think defining that is critical and getting the right brief. I would like this to be the best transport hub in the whole of Europe, as we want the city to be the best transport and movement city in the whole of Europe. So as we're focusing on that, maybe we could look at what others are doing around the country and in Europe and get the best ideas and make sure that we have them here. I think the points already about who uses is that those are important, and I just want to add that from all round the area, families use the private schools in the city, and people come from all around the area for Addenbrooke's. And I think every travel hub the design should cater to encourage parents to use the travel hubs to drop their children off and go into the schools in Cambridge, and also for them to be confident to be picked up from these locations. And the same for, it would be great if people could come to every travel hub around the city and know that they could get really good transport to Addenbrooke's. And that would mean talking to Addenbrooke's about what might be appropriate here, and also talking to the schools. But getting the brief right is really important. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Christina.
Thank you. I welcome all the reflections on what this travel hub could be and the ambitions to link it and share all of that. I think the question for us is around the site of it, and I just wanted to observe that as an assembly, as James in the questioning pointed out, we did really challenge and raise some of these issues last September. And I think because intuitively I look at this site and I go, how can it be it's too close in or not moving it enough? And I think I was one of those voices, and I think there is an assembly, I think it's a sign of good work that we then said, okay, we really challenged back and you've taken the time now to go away and you've come back to us as the technical experts, and I'm not a technical expert in this thing, to say, no, we have taken all those questions and for a variety of reasons in the modelling, this is now the best site. And therefore, I want to thank you for that work and say that despite my maybe intuitive, could there not be another option, I accept the expert opinion and prepared to endorse this site move.
Thanks, Kristen Ann. Claire, you wanted to come back on
Yes,
your earlier points. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that, of course, it is the preferred type P1 is in the green belt, and I'd just like the officers to comment on the use of the green belt for park and ride sites, just so that we are clear about the relationship of the governing regulations in relation to use of park and ride sites that are in relation to the green belt for use of park and ride.
Thanks, Claire. So that's 3 more contributions I was coming back to officers for. My own, if I could just sort of elaborate Claire's question a bit on the end. From my own point of view, it would be useful to understand what we perceived as the planning limitations on what can be done at a park and ride or a travel hub that is in the Greenbelt. So, Peter?
Yeah, I'll start, Chair, and Joe will correct me when I go wrong. So just in terms of the green belt, pretty much all of the options are in the green belt. A number of the existing park and ride sites in Cambridge are all or in part in Greenbelt. Greenbelt is a special designation where you have to demonstrate the transport infrastructure, special circumstances for putting them in that location. Which means that when we do go to put the planning application in, we will rightly be challenged to articulate why we are proposing this special development in the Greenbelt. Now, I just caveat all that was clearly there are national conversations about Greenbelt going on, and I will defer to planning colleagues in terms of where they are. So the circumstances exist in Cambridge already. The proposals are predicated on in this geography of a facility in the Greenbelt, but we will nevertheless need to demonstrate why Greenbelt and why this location as part of the planning application, and that's entirely right. That's what we should do. In terms of Katie's point on travel hubs, we have done that work, and that's where we're picking up the ideas around what others travel hub facilities. Just skipping back to the Greenbelt, though, we do need to be mindful of what is reasonable within the Greenbelt. So Costa Coffee, or indeed other coffee outlets are available, is not going to happen in the Greenbelt in a park and in a travel hub location for understandable reasons. Now, that may well be that working with planning colleagues in the future that might change, but at the moment, that's not what we would be applying for, because that wouldn't be under a sort of special interest designation. And clearly, if we're looking at charging facilities, if we're looking at cycle-based facilities, that would be in keeping with things around the travel hub. So Greenbelt status does mean that we are limited in what we could apply for or not. We continue discussions with all of the hospitals in the locality, Biomedical Campus and others, and indeed with private schools on needs going forward. Obviously, a lot of this is based on bus provision, and very much the hubs, we should be looking at more than just park and ride services. There should be stop services, there should be local services going in, which in part will deal with some of the issues north of the A14, and that's the conversation that at the moment we would have with bus companies, but if I haven't already mentioned it before, there is a bus reform consultation ongoing that people may want to partake on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Neil? And then I'm going to try and round up this part of the discussion.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I appreciate a lot of this discussion kind of pertains to any travel hub. And it's how this one fits in with our ambitions to join up passenger transport, and that requires buses and all the rest of it. So there's some questions of hub-to-hub transfers and that sort of thing, so that people don't have to come all the way into town in order to get out to the other side, and this might relate to Adam Brooks and that sort of stuff. And I would urge people to talk to the mosque as well. It's similar to the problems with the tidal flow for football games. We had the same sort of problems with the mosque. The other question about this particular site, it's right next to the airport site, and so these things have to be future-proofed, of course. And so what are we thinking about the relationship between P1 and future development at that site?
Thanks, Neil. Peter, just...
Yeah, so in part, I mean, that links in part back to James Littlewood's original question: have we assessed the impacts of growth in the business case? And we have. Obviously, if the airport site came forward, that's going to put significant transport demand in this part of the city, and a travel hub that operates more than just a park and ride, operates as you can get off one bus and get on another bus, or you can get off one bus and get on a bike and get on the local cycling facilities, that offers that opportunity as part of the airport. I mean, certainly in terms of the early work of the city deal, the idea was if something the size of the airport came forward, you would need some form of bespoke busway type, mass transit type facility to serve that. And I know that planning colleagues, that will be part of their considerations as they develop the emerging local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. So I'm going to try and draw this first part of the discussion to a conclusion. And as Christian Allen very rightly reminded us, that is on the relatively narrow question of the choice of location for the travel hub. Like Claire, I was originally a sceptic. Let's say I needed a lot of persuasion that the site one that we're looking at was the right one. I think we have had a useful exercise in our own purpose, really, which is to push back and kick the tires of what we recommended. And I think that has been done. I've attended meetings along with Claire, at which this has been put under some pressure. And I think that I'm perfectly willing, from my own point of view, to say, you know, the game's up on that further inquiry. I think none of us can really say that one of the other sites is a better one. And obviously, it's not a question of do we need a site at all. We know we do need a site. So I'm assuming by the lack of contrary voices that be our view. I think we ought to note from the discussion as well, though, that the members have expressed a series of aspirations for a range of supporting uses of the travel hub or functions of the travel hub, including, commercial ones, which there are some problems about delivering for the moment, but particularly around links to other points in and around the city, and also signing and the things like toilets and so on and so forth. So I think we will record all of those and send those comments to the board so that they're on the radar screen. But if everyone's okay with that, I'd like to then go to the second part of this conversation, which is on the same project around what's described on page 24 as Phase A issues. So this I'm interpreting as the question about the part of the project which is between the Chisholm Trail and the city centre to where the Elizabeth Way roundabout is now, which we put on the shelf as I think we were reminded primarily because of the planning applications that were coming in around the Elizabeth Way roundabout. And so there obviously is some sense of anticipation about when we can have that other segment of the project. And I think it's appropriate that members of the Assembly can express a view or ask questions about that. I would like to kick that off really because this is in an area I represent, and it is a bit mystifying to me that we're saying that the Grafton Centre development is part of the reason why we don't know enough about what we need at Elizabeth Way roundabout. The Grafton Centre planning application has been approved now, I think since we last talked about this, and I think we understand that a significant contribution will be made to improving the public highway along East Road in ways that has been discussed elsewhere. I'm not sure there is more to know from the Grafton Centre development about this. So obviously that's only one of the two developments. Can you help us understand what the interface is and when we might be able to go forward, or whether the whole of this part of the scheme is held up on that issue, or whether parts of that scheme could go forward?
Chair, I think you're asking me to stray into matters sort of a little beyond the role that we have. So just to sort of confirm what you've said previously, that we did, I'm not sure whether I used put it on the shelf, but I think could well have been. So we will park this piece of work, but we will also park this budget. So, because I think I was asked directly at the time, is this a budget saving exercise? No, we need to put this on hold whilst we work closely, collaboratively, and in support of our planning colleagues around two particular developments in this area, let alone what happens further out with emerging local plan, which clearly will have an impact in terms of traffic flows and others. As I sit here today, I can't give you the output of all of that work. And you know, Chair, I do occasionally try and like to meet expectations, albeit seem to fail miserably. So that what we're trying to do is to get a comprehensive view of what that means. Now the challenge is that's a really important location near the centre of the city, and what you do there and what priority you give to various modes and what capacity you can generate is really important, is really tricky from an operational point of view, and will have a profound effect on the operation of that part of the city. And as we know in our city environment, we do a tweak here and something somewhere else has an impact. So we are committed to undertaking this piece of work with partners. We have the budget to do that, and the Chair's rightly referenced Section 106 income that will come in. And as soon as I am able to come forward with proposals, then that's what we'll do. And I fear that's not quite the answer one was hoping for.
Well, I'm going to leave it to others if they have any questions before I say anything. Anyone else have any other questions on this? I've got Claire Ruskin.
Slightly tentatively, because I fully appreciate what Peter is saying, but I'm very sympathetic with what Josh and CamCycle are thinking, in that an awful lot of our focus has been on the major functions, the Chisholm Bridge, fantastic transformational projects which we are delivering, brilliant. It does mean that our roads and our normal ways around Cambridge on a bicycle are still quite perilous, and we're not focused on those. So I would love to be able to do both. I've lived by the Elizabeth Way roundabout for 12 years, and actually I use the underpass, and I wouldn't particularly want to see it different. There are some very dangerous roads around there for cycling on. We've improved East Road to a large extent for cycling. Our Newmarket Road to get to Chisholm Trail is pretty nasty. So I would love us to be able to do both, but I fully accept we don't have the bandwidth to do everything that we would like to do.
Because that's part of the challenge we've got. If we're not careful, we go in, we spend 3 million, 5 million, 7 million, pick a number, to improve one or a couple of modes in that location, and then something else has to happen whereby that is either abortive cost or there are further changes and road space in Cambridge is beyond at a premium. And so that's so it would be great to go in and do something now. I entirely understand that, and you may recall when we did the consultation on Elizabeth Way roundabout, and I have to freely say I thought there would be a clear response to that consultation, but it was very mixed, because there's a lot of people who look at that roundabout and think that in urban realm and urban fabric, that might not be quite what we want to see, but it's a damned effective gyratory, and if you take it away, there's an impact. And so we got very mixed messages to that. So the real challenge is not go in and do something short term that then has to be changed. Apologies, Chair.
Okay. Katie?
Yes, I think it's interesting because the centre of that roundabout is the boundary of 3 wards, including Petersfield. So I'm also very interested in this. And it's also that this roundabout has a sort of dual carriageway going around it. And it's basically, all the roads are dual carriageway, which soon become single carriageways apart from Newmarket Road. And it's really, the question I think is, do we need those dual carriage, where do you go from dual to single? Is it off these roundabouts or is it somewhere else? But I think that we should be ambitious. And I'm hope that the 2 major planning applications, one's resolved and maybe the other one will be fairly soon, and hopefully that will be ambitious as well in its own right as far as improving movement. So I hope it can be soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. I didn't require a response, no. Yep. I was just wondering, because although we can hope that the planning applications do flow forward reasonably fast and enable us then to make progress, but if they don't, and we're rather putting ourselves in the hands of the people behind that development, is there a stage you could foresee when we needed to break this into quick wins that could fit most eventualities?
I think there is. You can't sit in a position forever, is the reality, and I think we need to get a sense of what the planning context is in the city, what the feedback is from planning colleagues, and then is there a point where actually we do need to do that short-term intervention, but accepting that there's always that potential risk.
And when would you say that might be?
I think I would want to take a consultation with planning colleagues and get a sense of that. I mean, I am very reluctant to put public money into something that then needs to be taken out and more money goes in, and I think most people will be in that position. But equally, I do recognise the challenges on that location. And just to pick up on Katie's point, there are some very big decisions potentially to be made around that junction. And we need to be cognizant of that and very careful in terms of taking those decisions.
Okay, I mean, I make no apologies for labouring the point, because it's not actually just the roundabout, it's the whole segment that goes with it, and so it's not solely about the roundabout. Okay, I think on the Phase A issues, we obviously don't have a particular proposal to make here, but I think that I would like to pass to the board some considerable eagerness for progress on Phase A, and leave it at that for the moment. So thank you very much, Peter. Thanks, everyone. We go on to the next item on our overall agenda now, which is the item 9, Cambridge South East Transport Scheme. That's it. Well, I think we've done the recommendations, Katie. Yes, we need to change the, Katie is saying that we need to change the terminology from park and ride to travel hub in the recommendations. So I think we all go with that one.
I apologise for that earlier on.
Okay. So yes, so item 9, Cambridge South East Transport Scheme. This is on your agenda packs from page 33 to 44. Peter's going to introduce this ultimately, but first we have some public questions. And so let me invite the people asking those to prepare themselves. The first question is a question from Jim Rickard, which will be asked by Stephen Partridge-Hicks, who we met earlier. I would also say that this carries a bit of weight, this question, because a similar question was asked by John Latham, and I wanted us to avoid duplication, and a similar question was asked by James Littlewood, and I wanted to avoid duplication. So you're standing in place of two others as well.
So a question from Jim Rickard. At the GCP Executive Board last year on the 28th of September, Andy Williams suggested that if finance for the GCP's preferred route was not forthcoming within 6 months, then the board should be, and I quote, seriously considering different proposals. Brian Milnes concurred and also acknowledged the consultation process had been flawed and that the notion that the GCP's preferred route would serve the communities of Stapleton and Great Shelford had been discounted. Councillor Milnes went on to describe preferred route as, again, I quote, hugely more expensive than the alternative, about £100 million. In view of those remarks, including an implicit acknowledgement of the now notorious vote-splitting technique employed in the consultation, and given that almost double that 6-month period has elapsed, will the Joint Assembly recommend to the Executive Board first that paragraphs 1.17, 1.18 of the minutes of this item are corrected, and secondly, that since the prospect of raising the finance for GCP preferred scheme seems ever less likely, the board should, in Mr. Williams' words, seriously consider different proposals.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Partridge-Hicks. We will couple the answer to that with the subsequent questions, and the next one is yours. So this is you yourself.
Me, myself, yes, thank you.
Rather than ask.
This is a question addressed for governance. It's addressed to the board, not to the executive. Since the decision to proceed with the off-road route in 2018, there have been some significant changes. These include cancelling the Cambridge Autonomous Metro, the future expansion of the biomedical campus next to 1307, increased costs of mitigating environmental impact. All new developments must demonstrate they have zero carbon net gain on biodiversity. Planning permission for the development of a retirement home with a country park, causing a change in the route, and the costs of this proposed CSET scheme spiralling to over £160 million. In light of these material changes, why has there not been a formal public review to reassess the options when it is good practice to do so? The alternative in-road bus lane that has the support of the local communities will save you £100 million. Isn't this a basic failure of good governance and accountability by the members of this Assembly?
Thank you for your question. And the third question is from Josh Grantham.
The emerging designs that we have seen for Francis Crick Avenue have been poor, to say the least, and seem to be going backwards from the previous design iterations. In our opinion, they do not represent good value for money. For example, changing the geometry of a roundabout, only then to require further works if CSET is delivered, is a surefire way to increase costs and enrage people. If the goal with these short-term funding is to address transport issues around the biomedical campus, then there are surely more urgent priorities than Francis Crick, such as the complete redesign of the Addenbrooke's roundabout, the need to improve busway access from the existing Baberham Park and Ride to Addenbrooke's and the Southern Busway, and other schemes in the biomedical campus. These problems require immediate attention and are not dependent on future transport schemes that may or may not be realised. So, who has defined the scope of this project? How constrained is the funding? And what is the split of funding between the Transport Works Order preparation and the Francis Crick Avenue scheme? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Josh. Must apologise to Mr. Partridge Hicks because I'm going to have to invite him back again. So you've got a question on behalf of James Littlewood, I think. If you wouldn't mind coming back and answering, I should have taken that when you were there a few minutes ago. So this is on behalf of James Littlewood from Cambridge Past, Present and Future.
Exactly. The officer's report, paras 1.14 to 1.19, omits the main reason why this option was chosen. It was not, as the report suggests, to serve the villages. The route is not close to the centre of any of the villages. The case of Stapleford and Shelford is outside the villages, up a hill, meaning that apart from a small number of households, it's quicker to travel to the biomedical campus to Cambridge by train or using the DNA cycle path. Even in Sawston, Seaton bus stop can only serve the people living on the eastern part of the village. The remainder of the village is 1.5 miles away. The route was chosen because the then Mayor of Cambridge, James Palmer, insisted that major public transport infrastructure must be capable of being used on the Cambridge Autonomous Metro Scheme. This became policy under his transport plan. Because building bus lanes next to 1307 did not meet his criteria, the GCP had no choice but to opt for the new bus road through the countryside. However, the Mayor had no funding or a business case for his metro. When a new mayor was elected in 2021, it was dropped from transport plans. By this time, the GCP had spent 2 years and significant public money progressing the scheme. This is sunk capital, and one of the main reasons why large projects like Juggernauts are very difficult to turn around. Rather than acknowledge the main reason the scheme no longer existed and carried a review, the GCP has simply ploughed on. The influence of the mayor is included in the notes of the GCP decision, and at the time, I, that is James Littlewood, Chief Executive of Cambridge Past, Present and Future, was told by the project manager for the CSET scheme the mayor was the main reason for the off-road route. In private discussions, I, again that's James, have held with some of the local decision makers, they share our concerns that the wrong scheme has been chosen, but none of them want to rock the boat. As Assembly members, your role is to scrutinise and question the proposals presented to you. In your report, why is there no mention of the main reason this option for CSET was selected, or that there is any doubt that the wrong decision has been made?
Thank you very much indeed. And so I'm going to ask Peter to run through those, please.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the question from Jim Rickard, the Cambridge South East Transport Scheme has been subject to extensive consultation and significant business case development. A review of the alternative route was undertaken, and the assessment favoured the preferred off-road solution as being faster, more reliable, more patronage, more active travel users. It is notable that a few short months after that board decision, the government made available grant monies to this area to specifically progress the scheme in two aspects. One is to submit the Transport and Works Act application to the Secretary of State to be considered through the appropriate processes by the Planning Inspectorate before a final decision is made. And secondly, to invest in Francis Crick Avenue to reflect both the CSET scheme and the emerging is the wrong word, for the new Cambridge South, it's emerging, and it's a new rail station, the Cambridge South station that is on track for delivery next year. It's a rail station, it would be on track. And so that is what the proposals are for in terms of the paper. As noted in the paper, discussions with MHCLG about future funding continue, and to date they have been positive. Turning to Mr. Partridge Hicks's question in terms of 2018, public consultation in 2020 resulted in the GCP Executive Board confirming the preferred strategy for Cambridge South East, and this was reaffirmed by the Executive Board in 2023 when it reconsidered the position. They made specific recommendations at that time that the scheme would be paused, subject to money coming in to progress the scheme. And that the money is now coming in, as the paper alludes, to progress on those two particular elements. If a planning application is approved, it would progress through that basis. And the business case, that is extensive and has been developed over a number of years, will continue to be updated and kept up to date as required by the Department for Transport. The scheme has and will continue to be taken through appropriate governance processes and will be considered by the Secretary of State at the next stage if the decision to progress is taken. In terms of Josh Grantham's question, so the money has been made available to progress the CSET scheme. It's not transferable. The grant letter is quite clear. The design of Francis Crick has involved extensive stakeholder engagement, and it hasn't gone backwards. It is being future-proofed, as indeed is the roundabout being future-proofed. We're also working with other part of the GCP on the local greenway scheme. So we have designed it on that basis, and the tie-ins will continue. The scope of the project has not changed, and it has been revised as a result of road safety audits, which is something that this Assembly regularly challenges me on through those conversations. And then in terms of James Littlewood's question, I can find my notes. So I don't agree with James's assertion. The CSET scheme has been subject to 5 public consultations. It has been supported through those consultations. We have gone through a series of iterations in terms of the business case. We have currently an outline business case stage, which is the business case stage we're supposed to be at, and it will come back subject to a planning decision for full business case stage. And again, the decision can then be taken to progress or otherwise. It's worth noting that coming out of this work, that the Cambridge South East scheme supports a corridor that is under considerable pressure now, with planned growth and congestion and traffic of 50% over the next decade. We have 20,000 people currently working in the biomedical campus, albeit I think that's a little bit of an underestimation. We're looking at 26,000 by the end of the decade. We've got 6,000 people working at Granta Park and Baybrum. There's a need to make sure that there are sustainable travel options provided to people in and around those campus sites, and indeed in and around the villages, which is something that both this Assembly and the Board have expressed a desire for previously. So the paper today focuses on the government grant and the government grant only. Thank you, Chair.
Peter, could I just ask you about, I'm just trying to make sure people get the answers to their questions, or at least a response to them. The James Littlewood in his question was telling us that the scheme is only what it is because of the then as metro project. I just felt that needed more direct answering, perhaps.
It isn't. It isn't. You can't develop a business case on the basis of it will be so. The business case required by Department for Transport in all of its glory requires you to assess the various cases from strategic to financial to the benefits case to say this is the scheme that you are bringing forward. These are the options that you have assessed, and therefore this is the rationale that you've used to apply that. We, as the County Council, as Peterborough City Council, are obliged to reflect the strategic position of the local transport plan, which is what was done at the time, but that did not require an off-road only solution to be explored, and indeed in the business case, other solutions have been explored with the rationale outlined. And should this get to a public inquiry, I'm sure the question will be asked at that point, and we will be explaining and articulating that to the planning inspector.
Thank you for that elaboration. Thank you for the responses to those questions. Again, these challenging questions and ones that members can pick up in the debate shortly. Peter, would you like to present the report?
A very, very short report, Chair. I mean, some of the questions sort of covered the background to this. I know that members are familiar with the scheme. The scheme was formally paused in 2023, subject to receiving further money from, at the time anywhere. The government announced in the last fiscal event that the £7.2 million would be made available specifically to submit a transport and works application for the scheme and to undertake improvements to Francis Crick associated with Cambridge South Station that is due to open in the early middle part of next year. And so the proposals that will go, that are in front of you today, that will go to the Executive Board are to say that a Transport and Works Act application should be made, and then that should go through due process, and that proposals for Francis Crick should be delivered and tied in as far as reasonably possible with the Cambridge South Station works. Happy to pause it there, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. So then we come to our debate, and I'm going to suggest that there are two things we need to discuss, and they should be really separated for clarity. One is matters to do with the Transport and Works Act application, which is to do with progressing the scheme to the next stage, and the second is the changes on Francis Crick Avenue. And I think these are we know what we're talking about by separating those. So could I first ask for contributions in relation to the first of these, which is taking the CSET scheme to the next stage, the Transport and Works Act application? Sorry, I didn't see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And then my comments, and then we've got a peer review going on at South Cam, so I'm going to have to run back to Camborne. When it comes to taking this to the next stage, I know many of us have found the debates around this really difficult. It's really challenging. We need infrastructure, and even the best schemes are always going to have somebody that it impacts in a negative way. But from the start, I just can't help but think that a busway along here is just not the right proposal, and that this, hundreds of millions of pounds that have been spent would be better off have been spent to reopen the railway with Haverhill. And I appreciate that there are other things with that, but it just doesn't. Actually makes me feel really sad, because I know the work that's gone in by officers, and I know actually what has been really challenging for residents as well, and the many, many rounds this has gone through. For everybody involved, whether you're for or against, it's just been a roller coaster. But I can't sit here and say, go to the next round, because I just don't think it's the right thing for residents. It doesn't mean I don't respect the work that's been done on all sides, but I can't support that going forward. And just wanted to make that clear, that it's a peer review and I'm not now stopping out the chamber. The reopening of the railway, I think, really would make a big difference to transport, and also to relieve pressure on the growth of the city as well, because we've seen expansion Haverhill, but if we don't start looking at these things where development can happen further afield than just Cambridge, I really worry we're just going to be engulfed into a massive housing arena, especially with the new targets. So that's my view. I appreciate I'm probably not for the first time not going to be the most popular person in the meeting for saying it, but I have to go with what I think is right.
Thank you very much, Heather, for that. And feel free to exit when you want. Yes, perhaps we get your response. Just
in terms of Haverhill as an example. So as part of the business case process, that was assessed. It was assessed some period of time ago now. The cost was put at somewhere between 600 and 700 million pounds to reopen the rail line. I mean, clearly you'll be aware there's also been a number of national reopen rail station projects since, and it's not gone at any traction with the rail industry in terms of that rail line. So that has been assessed, and should we move to the next stage of the planning inspector, that would be laid before the planning inspector as one of the alternatives that we've looked at.
Yeah, if I can, thank you. I do appreciate that. I just think that the money I know it would require more, but it's just what you think is right. And if you wouldn't mind, it's just a very small thing on the next item on page 91, energy income on the budget. It's still not got any figures in it. So if you wouldn't mind trying to remember that, Chair, when it comes round. Thank you.
We'll get to that when we get to it, Heather. I'm sorry you won't be with us for it. Fine, thank you very much for that. So are there other contributions? Claire Ruskin.
So this is a complex one. We've always known it's been complex, and I am happy to rock the boat if we need to rock the boat. However, we have here a situation where, because the officers have been so deeply embroiled in this through the whole process, the paper doesn't necessarily give the full story that would convince me or others in the public in the papers at the moment about the case for this. But if you take the time to go into the background papers, the strategic outline business case, the outline business case, all the detail that we have gone through over the many years that we've been looking at this, you will see that we have looked at the other options. So we have strategy 1, strategy 2, strategy 3, the railway. Clearly, I do not believe that opening up the railway again would actually be a solution to this. It's not flexible enough. It's not something that we can integrate well into this area. So I end up having looked back through the old work that we have done, and it has also been revised and reviewed in light of the change of the mayoral opinions throughout time, which we know were difficult at the time. The change of the numbers, not only have we got the workers on CBC, we've also got 14,500 visitors and patients every day, I think. So we're in excess already of 30,000 people travelling to and from the site every day. It is growing phenomenally. We're also growing Babraham, we're growing Grant Park, and we need those for the country. So again, Cambridge is delivering something for the country that is not difficult to achieve, that is very difficult to achieve for anywhere else. But we are having to take that one, the team of the UK, I think. So for me, the segregated route is flexible enough. It's not ideal. I would like not to have it. I would like to be able to build another carriageway along the 1307, which I also travel along quite a lot. But looking at all the evidence that we have gained over the years, it's been a long, hard path to this, and I personally think it is the better way to go forward. Not ideal, but better than the other options we have still.
Thank you, Claire. Kristen Ann.
So just to declare interest, as I start this item, I represent some occupiers on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and also some of the other parks in my professional field, in addition to my role at the university on this council. I think I welcome the ability to progress the scheme. I think it's a much needed connectivity route to the south of the city. It's needed now, as has been highlighted. In fact, it's been needed for a time. It's not just needed for the campus. I think that came across this Cambridge Biomedical Campus. It is the other campuses that exist along the route. It's also a connectivity into the city centre in that it connects to the existing bus route and the development that has seats come up from the station and the workers coming in, that aspect of the city. So while just the need on the campus alone, but it is also a much broader scheme. We know from having worked with and spoken to the people that use public transport to access the Cambridge Biomedical Campus that the most important things are safety, speed and reliability. And as Claire pointed out, she's been a part of the Assembly for longer than me, when you review all the options, all options have downside. A dedicated public transport route that doesn't just allow a public transport vehicle, but also has cycling and walking provision that is safe along it, is going to be the scheme that serves the needs of people trying to travel in from the south of the city. I would, though, also picking up Heather's comments about the important links to Haverhill, I don't think that we should, as we look forward in this scheme, I think we should be ambitious for it, the links to the Wellcome campus, how we do address people coming up from Haverhill to meet the other end of it, and also make sure, as we think forward, how we address the last mile connectivity to the campuses. But for now, I welcome the ability to take this forward.
Thanks, Christina. Any other hands? None? Katie?
I think if this, so this is to agree to proceed with the planning application or the TWO. I think if one thing that I've asked for about any guided bus route that we've been talked about here is that these are future-proofed, because I went to Terminal 5 at Heathrow recently, and there was it looked like a guided bus route, but there were these electric pods coming along, and I hadn't seen those before, but they're very interesting. But we don't know what's coming along, and we need to ensure that any routes that we do like this can enable autonomous vehicles and mass transit and new forms of mass transit that might be cost efficient and effective. So I hope that we can ensure that we might be calling it a busway, but it's actually a future route for all forms of light mass transit in the future. And then I'd also like to say that I also think that some connectivity to Haverhill is critically important, and it's beyond this scheme, and it's also beyond the boundary of the County Council, the GCP, and also the Combined Authority. But we have a huge number of people travelling in from Haverhill to the city, and they form a really key part of our workforce. And that issue is something that does need to be thought about and resolved. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. I'm coming back to Neil in a moment, but we've got 3 questions to ask Peter about. I just wanted to say that I'm very pleased you made the point about future-proofing, because I had thought that the real answer in relation to the debate that happened in the past about a light rail system or metro system was that whilst that was something that couldn't find funding and wasn't investable at the time it was raised, that may well change, and that what we were doing here was providing an alignment that would initially be a busway, but could well mutate into something like a light rail or mass transit system in the future. So I think it's really important, especially in relation to people are talking about the importance of rail, that this is not a goodbye to that issue. It's just a recognition of this is where we are today, but what we're doing is something that can adapt to further uses in the future. I guess you mean me. Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks.
I'll face forward. So in terms of future-proofing, yes, absolutely right. I think we previously discussed that we're not proposing the existing heavily engineered solution of the current busway, great as it is, but clearly it's of its time. We are looking at a segregated solution where you could take off buses and you could then retrofit at much lower cost and angst to a light rail or other solutions, or indeed e-bikes or e-scooters. You know, that would be a segregated space that could be used going forward. And that's been part of the solution that we've proposed. I mean, other than that, Chairman, I would reflect on I think Haverhill is incredibly important as a corridor. Obviously, as Katie said, it's beyond our and the current authorities' remit, but I would imagine in conversations about future emerging local plans that corridor is thoroughly discussed beyond the sort of traditional local authority boundaries, given the movement of people coming into the Biomedical campus, in particular from the Haverhill area.
Peter, I've got one further speaker, which is Neil. So same position as the last discussion. I'm proposing to draw a line under this part of the discussion after you, Neil.
Thank you very much, Chair. Hopefully it's not too controversial. It's, again, making the case for the off-road solution, and I think we can make a stronger case. There's a big difference between on-road and off-road solutions in these. And I make the comparison with the Caxton divot to the Black Cat roundabout. This is a dualling operation, and we're talking about £1 billion to do this. And if it was opened today, we would go from the current 30,000 vehicle movements a day to more than 50,000 vehicle movements a day, and it doesn't take any traffic off the surrounding roads either. So this, when you build more road, you get more traffic. It's almost like it has a detrimental effect on the whole road network. The opposite is the case with passenger transport. The more passengers you get to use passenger transport, it supports the rest of the network. And so in this case, it's about scalability. And talking to Councillor Thornborough's comments on future-proofing, it's about the fact that we can carry more and more and more. And so that huge difference between on scale, even if it's passenger transport, if you need to build more roads, you'll get more other vehicles on it, whereas off-road, it's always going to be a win-win. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. I'm now going to move to the... No, let's try and summarise what we've said about the first half of the debate first. I think I recognise Heather has dissented from this. She's gone, but that we have to recognise that. But I have not heard other voices raised against the next step in the process. I think we did believe less than a year ago that we had the right scheme, and the same questions were asked us then. We put this on a waiting list because of the funding issue. We've subsequently got a request from the government to take this to the next stage, which they obviously wouldn't do without understanding the funding situation. That does give us and give the opportunity for people to raise the question about whether this is the right scheme, but that has been asked repeatedly, and I didn't hear that anyone in the Assembly today believes that, has suddenly started believing that this might not be the right scheme after all, having been reminded of all the factors that the questioners and Heather have. So I think in relation to the first part of the debate, we would be encouraging the board to proceed with the Transport and Works Act and take this project to the next stage. The second part of our debate, though, was on the Francis Crick Avenue, which is kind of a much more localised affair. Are there any members who want to speak on that? So, Katie and Christina.
It's difficult to talk about this because I don't know what the details are, but I do know that it is so important that this is resolved and ideally built and installed and tested before the new South Cambridge station operates. And I also think it's not just the buses, it's how people walk and cycle and use public transport to the station. But I am concerned, and it may be happening as well, about how people arriving at the station and going to the hospital, whether that's being considered. I really hope it is, because it's not just going to the campus, it's going to the hospital. And when this new station is open, there will be 65 other stations where you can get on and then get off at South Cambridge Station, 65. So as well as having the best accessible station at South Cambridge, we need to encourage the Combined Authority and the county to make sure those other 65 stations are accessible as well. It's been in the news recently, and the rural stations around Cambridge really need to be reviewed and improved so that everybody can rely on getting on a station and getting off at this new one, which I'm really looking forward to it opening next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Christina?
I just wanted to pick up really on Josh's question of this scheme versus other ones. First of all, as Peter says, the money was made available for this scheme. It's not that other schemes on the campus are not important, but this one certainly is. As you said, it also highlights the importance of future-proofing. I'm not sure a long time ago that junction was future-proof, potentially, and it's now it was of real concern to the campus occupiers what was going to happen when Cambridge South Station opened, as Katie Thornbury said, and how people were going to move across that junction safely, and the different parties that were involved, Network Rail, the County Council, the city, that actually the funding being available for GCP to coordinate that and to think about it holistically and to progress work on that junction is very welcome. And I don't know the details. I don't know if they're going to be shared now of what is being proposed, but fundamentally that work is very important for a safety concern for the campus to progress. Maybe not right today, but certainly when the station opens and all the people that we anticipate start walking off that junction.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just wanted to request a point of clarification. The public question that was asked on this talked about gave an example of the Addenbrooks roundabout on Hills Road as something that was potentially more worthy of action. My recollection is that we actually took a decision in relation to that in our last cycle, but because I think, as Christian said, that the money's coming from different places and they're part of different schemes, but both of these are a priority and they aren't trade-offs.
They're not trade-off, and they're important. And you're right, Chair, we do have a safety scheme for the Addenbrooks roundabout that is ready to go, and we're working with Streetworks colleagues at the County Council who, and I'll say it again, have a devil of a job trying to manage Streetworks access in Cambridge. We're trying to get on to that site as soon as we can to deliver those improvements, and that doesn't change as a result of this. And I know there are conversations elsewhere about how you go further with that, with that junction, and we will play our role in terms of those conversations. So that we're looking at that anyway with a separate arm. What we're essentially looking at here, and there's almost two issues as this scheme has evolved. One is the sort of the CSET scheme around public transport, active travel, particularly segregated cycleways, and footways linking with the buses being able to stop on Francis Crick. But then the point that Katie's made a few times around the flow of 2.25 million passengers coming out, which means there are a series of additional crossings being proposed for Francis Crick. And the artist impression, I think, catches, I don't know how we're flicking through these, captures that a bit better. So how can we facilitate a movement of people to and from, either wheeling or pedestrians? Are we able to click back up? And so that's the area just outside the rail station. So that's very soft. That's priority to walking and cycling and not vehicles. That's making sure we've got sufficient crossings in. So the existing crossings that are there, we're going to widen, and then we're going to put 3 additional crossings in to make sure that it gives that sort of ability to permeate into the site is there, as well as clearly being able to focus on delivery of the enhanced bus services that we're expecting down the line. We are seeking to make sure that there isn't a retrofit requirement going forward in terms of balancing all of this. Now, at the moment, we're looking to be on site at the end of the calendar year, and we're looking to tie in with the final network rail works in the early and middle of next year. And I'm sure that will generate questions, Chair.
Katie, yes, you want to come back?
So the planning application that came to the JDCC committee, we signposting to the station, and we were told that the application didn't include any signposting to the station, and it would be really good if that was thought of and allowed for and put in before the station opens, both from the Trumpington side and from the hospital.
Looks like Peter's writing that one down, so I think that's the answer. Claire, Simon?
I just, we've discussed this but at other meetings, and we've discussed it in different places. I really want to be reassured that any modelling that's done takes account of the tightness of the site as it is already, and the fact that it's going to become even tighter with a cancer hospital and a children's hospital. So it's not a normal site. It's a site where people will be going to work in biomedical institutions. It's a site where people will be going to visit for hospitals. It's a site where patients will be coming stressed, anxious with relatives. It's not a normal site. So I really want to be reassured that all of these factors are taken into account in the modelling for the use of whatever transport, whatever modes of transport there is going to be provided.
Thanks, Claire. Simon?
Yes, in common with Councillor Thornborough, I've considered this details of this development, of the Cambridge South development, a number of times at Joint Government Control Committee, and there's been a recurring theme, which is that the access to the station from the Francis Crick Avenue has been asked to do a lot of work. It's got cycle parking on it, it's got a access loop in and out, and is going to have this huge number of pedestrians as well. And therefore, we've been concerned that there should be these improvements to the highway network immediately outside the station to address this multiple conflicts between different modes of travel. And I think particular concern has been the ability of people to come, who, and a lot of them will be in ill health, to arrive at that station and to have easy public transport to wherever they need to be on the campus. And so that means a complementary service to the physical solutions is desperately required for this to work and to attract people to use the station rather than trying to battle the way through Cambridge traffic to get to the Addenbrooke's, the Addenbrooke site. So I'm really pleased to see this as a really important part of the development of the campus and the realisation of the full potential of the Cambridge South Station.
Thanks, Simon. I guess in my thinking of what summary we take to the board mode here, I'm picking up a lot of very important aspiration for this connection between road and rail to be really in place and effective. The question I haven't quite picked up is, so do you believe this scheme is it? Because that's the question that we've been asked. Okay, so how was the public questioner able to critique the quality of the scheme when we haven't seen the scheme?
Well, we've regular engagement with stakeholders. If members want to see more of the detail of the scheme, then we're happy to facilitate that. The scheme hasn't changed from... We've been given money to deliver this element of the Cambridge South East Transport Schemes. Going back to the question on modelling, we've done that. We've done the modelling. The challenge that you're articulating is Francis Crick Avenue is changing or about to change markedly. And whether we do this scheme or not, Francis Crick Avenue is about to change markedly, and everybody needs to get that. There's going to be a rail station there that changes the fabric of that environment. So what we're doing is we're using the Cambridge South East scheme, the general principles around promoting not just public transport, because public transport is straightforward. You make sure you've got that stopping facility as close to those locations to ensure you can try and get that complementary without control of the bus network. See previous conversations around current bus reform consultation. But then the fabric around the walking and cycling, because the fanning out and the coming in is incredibly important. So that's why those conversations have been fairly extensive since, I mean, this was announced by government. We didn't know it was coming. We're working very closely with the partners on the campus who've been very supportive. And again, this is a private road. So we're operating within that environment, but I will take the point around signposting and on that. And then with Network Rail in particular, who again have been very facilitating, to say, how do we pull this together to make sure that from our point of view, we deliver Cambridge South East, but at the same time, we manage that change in fabric to deal with the issues that are being raised around this suddenly is quite a different environment. And so if members would like a sort of more detailed brief, then we're happy to facilitate that. But the Cambridge South East scheme hasn't changed. That's part of the submission, because that's the bit that the government have sort of viewed. If that helps, Chair.
That does help. I think it means that we can't make a comment on a scheme's detail that we haven't seen, but that we must, in accordance with what people have said here, we must support the pursuit of solutions to the problem as presented and shared by everyone in principle. And I think probably to ask, therefore, the board to be sure themselves that the detailed design meets the objectives we've got for it. So.
I am concerned that this is going to be coming, the train station is opening next year, and I think it's going to be transformational, and I really hope that the design can proceed as quickly as possible, be funded in the way it needs to be funded, and working with all of the partners on the campus to ensure that as much as possible is dealt with, and then allow a time afterwards to review what provision is there and how it can be improved. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. So I think we're done on this item, and I'm going to suggest that we take a break before the last two items. So we'll reconvene at 5 to 4. Thank you. now at item number 10, Greater Cambridge Greenways. This is in your agenda packs from pages 45 to 50. We have some public questions on this, which we'll take at the beginning, but afterwards, I think Thomas Fitzpatrick is going to present the report. Yeah, okay. So let's look at the questions. Right, I've got two questions on this. One from Professors Brian Josephson and Judith Driscoll, and the other from Josh Grantham at CamCycle. Could I ask either Professor Josephson or Professor Judith Driscoll to come forward and ask their question? Professor Josephson, you have to, the seat behind you, I think. You are first, and so you have to press the button on the microphone on the right. Three minutes.
Yeah, okay.
And
No problem.
you'll see the red light when time's up.
Okay, well, this, I guess, is a rather, Adams Road is a rather trivial thing compared with the big projects we're talking about, but I think there's an important point to be made, which is that I think the Greenways team is, well, there's too much playing by the rules and not enough common sense. And that, perhaps if people thought about the proposals, they would come to different conclusions. Just to give an example of a previous thing, there's the crossing near Wilson College. They want to move it near the road junction with Manchester Road. Now that makes sense if you think what's the easiest for cyclists, you just go straight across. But actually, what they propose makes things more dangerous. People who want to turn right, they go onto the pavement before the junction because they know it's much safer to do that. So that's just an example. They also want to move the traffic island. There seems to be a theory that, well, some reason for it.
So,
that makes
Professor
it more dangerous
Joseph, you only have relatively limited time. I just maybe best to
Right,
focus
I'm
on
moving
Adams
straight
Road,
on to
which
Adams
you want to
Road
ask
now.
about.
I want to make the point that those things are more dangerous and they're not taking them into account. Well, for Adams Road, it's really that this is an important thing. This widening the footways, raised table, resurfacing in red asphalt to create a cycle street, softening the streetscape with rain gardens and so on. Well, I and my colleague who can't be here today were thinking this is ridiculous doing this because we cycle along Adams Road regularly. It's perfect as it is, except for getting onto Adams Road, which I agree might be a good thing, but it's really just a waste of money trying to replace it with sort of beautifying it, and it's not. The money could be much better spent elsewhere. That's really the only point I want to make.
Thank you very much. We will get the officer concerned to respond in a moment, but first I'm going to take the other public question we've got from Josh Grantham. I think you need to move now because that's the microphone for the next speaker.
Thanks. Whilst CamCycle fully supports the principle of the Greenway project, we are concerned about the design quality albeit actually not on Adams Road. And the lack of alignment with best practice for active travel infrastructure. To ensure the greenways and other active travel projects are designed to the highest standard, we strongly urge the GCP to collaborate with Active Travel England for design assurance. Active Travel England offers valuable services for any scheme that are publicly funded, including reviewing and providing feedback on designs to ensure they meet national standards and are fit for purpose. So, can the GCP commit to discussing all greenways proposals with Active Travel England and work to incorporate their feedback to enhance the design quality and effectiveness of these projects? Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Thomas, would you like to take each of those two questions in turn? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So starting with the question from Professor Josephson, the design for Adams Road has already been subject to public consultation and further public engagement, and the Executive Board agreed to those designs in December 2022, and they've been just simply developed further with input from local stakeholder groups, including the residents group along Adams Road. Our proposals to this street follow the road user hierarchy by creating more accessible footways for walking and wheeling, and they create priority for cyclists over motor vehicles whilst they use the street. In addition to this, we're proposing to reduce the parking along the street, which will increase the safety of the street for active travel users. This is a key connection that forms part of the Comberton Greenway, and it's seen as a vital project to encourage more active travel usage across the city. Turning to the question from CamCycle, Josh Grantham, the Greenways network is an essential component of the City Deal delivery programme. We've consistently confirmed that the Greenways are following appropriate national and local design guidance, such as LTM 120 and Cambridgeshire's Active Travel Design Guide. That said, we are happy to engage with involved Active Travel England in the design of schemes at an appropriate stage, and we will engage with them on this basis going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I do want to make sure that Professor Josephson has a full answer to his question. So the need to do something there is because we're going to have a lot more cyclists using that as a result of the Greenway?
Exactly that. I mean, so the route of the Greenway comes through from Comberton through Coton with a link to Hardwick, and the aim is to encourage as many people as possible to use that route into the city for active travel. So that's the proposals and was part of the outline business case that the board has already agreed.
Thanks very much. So your responses to the questions can be picked up by members of the Assembly when we get to our debate. Would you like to present your report?
Thank you very much, Chair. So firstly, just to introduce a couple of colleagues, to my right is Joe Harris from WSP as a technical director who'll be talking you through the green and blue infrastructure strategy with a few slides in a minute. And then hiding at the back is my colleague Jonathan Camp, who is the Senior Project Manager for both the Comberton and Barton Greenways. So if there are really detailed questions, then Jonathan may be asked to help. This paper seeks to do three different things. The first is in a response for a full paper on the green and blue infrastructure strategy. We have now brought that back to the Assembly and then obviously onto the board for consideration. And as said, Joe will go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. Secondly, it recommends that the Executive Board, that two sections of the Comberton Greenway are brought forward, so Adams Road and the section through Coton. Both of these have been discussed with local stakeholders and local members, and we'd just like to bring them forward for delivery early next year. And then thirdly, it asks that the Executive Board notes the changes in the designs within Barton Village following feedback from the Parish Council, and those changes are set out in section 2.14 of the report. Thank you. Sorry, I'll pass over to Joe to do the presentation.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for having me here. You've got it on there. Could you go full screen? Perfect. It's a bit far away, it's a bit small, but hopefully this has been issued online previously, so you should have a copy. So it's going to be a very brief presentation on an overview of the Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy. First off, going to run through a bit of policy context. So why are we doing a Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy? I'm sure, as you all know, in response to the global climate, biodiversity and social emergencies we face, the UN developed its Sustainable Development Goals, and they were adopted back in 2000. Yeah, oh, sorry. I've got it on here, so oh, the mic's moved. I thought they were fixed, but there we go. So that's clever. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, perfect. So, as I said, in response to the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, so hold it in front of me, we have a raft of guidance and a significant step change in our national policy and guidance to begin to address solutions to the issues, which all aim to try and create sort of multifunctional places that provide not only environmental resilience, but also deliver infrastructure that drives prosperity and promotes healthy lifestyles. So we have the UN SDGs on the left, and on the right we have the Greater Cambridge Emerging Local Plan with the key themes depicted rather appropriately for this presentation as a component of green infrastructure in the tree. The foundations, the roots, talking about the creation of homes, jobs and infrastructure, and the outputs of that on the right, shown as the stems and branches, so climate change, well-being and social inclusion, great places, and biodiversity and green spaces. So in terms of guidance and legislation, we have a plethora, some of it shown in the middle, some of the key bits that have influenced the strategy going forward. For active travel schemes, as Thomas mentioned earlier, we place a great focus on LT 120, but it's important to remember that this is just one of many complementary publications we need to consider and integrate into all our relevant infrastructure projects. Quick extract from the business case shown at the bottom. I'll read it out because it's small. The Greenways network will be designed to provide multiple environmental, cultural and social benefits, including wildlife corridors, linking areas of habitat together and creating new areas of habitat. The net impact will be to create well-designed and beautiful places that deliver on natural capital enhancements and biodiversity gain in line with policy, the Cambridge Local Plan and the Environment Act. Next slide, please. So when we talk about infrastructure, the default is tended to focus on sort of grey infrastructure, roads, bridges, railways, mobility hubs, whatever it may be. But infrastructure needs to be much broader than that to begin to deliver on our policy ambitions. To address this, GTP with us, we've developed a green and blue infrastructure strategy that will help inform proposals to ensure compliance and alignment with wider social and environmental aims and objectives. The GBI strategy sits alongside and is one of the mechanisms for delivering the biodiversity strategy that is also being developed. It's split into 3 parts with additional appendices, and I'll give a brief overview of those on the next few slides. Next slide, please. So the first piece of the report is the character framework, which is a strategic assessment of all the local landscape character across all the greenways. This looks at, in particular, the quality, the existing condition and features of our landscapes. It looks at sensitivity, how sensitive are they, and what capacity and suitability do they have to accommodate change. And it also looks at the value of our landscape and the importance of those qualities we previously described. There's a whole series of mapping in there, amongst other things, and we've gone through and we've broken down each greenway into a sequence of character types, which will have an influence on how the designs that run through them will need to be managed and developed. Next slide, please. So the next step is the spatial strategy. This is a framework that sets out the objectives and shows the opportunities for implementation across the routes. This contains the vision for the greenways, the objectives, design principles. It contains spatial strategies, so the key moves, the networks we can create, connectivity importantly, and it also gives design opportunities on a route-by-route basis, looking at where some of these interventions might be best placed. I'll just touch on the wheel down there. In terms of principles, there's 3 main themes. We've looked at people, we've looked at active travel, and we've looked at nature-based systems, which is the NB there. So in terms of people, we're looking at promoting livable and healthy places. and we're looking at enhancing the sense of place. For nature-based systems, it's protecting and enhancing biodiversity, and it's working with sustainable drainage systems. And for the active travel itself, it's about improving connectivity and creating resilient infrastructure. We've looked at a whole layer of GIS mapping. We've layered that up, and you can see the intersections where they meet, where it provides the most opportunity for enhancement. Next slide, please. The third piece of the puzzle is the design code. This design code is effectively guidance for designers to help them achieve the objectives and help them achieve policy compliance. It contains design considerations, standards, subject and context. It contains the design components and elements, the interventions we're talking about proposing and their component parts. And it also has a list of do's and don'ts, which is based on the landscape character and sensitivity and value we talked about earlier. On the screen, you'll see a little snapshot of some of the components we're talking about. There are many more, just a quick step, and how they might break down into their individual parts and where best they could be applied. And this is intended, as I said, for the designers to take hold of so they can make sure that the Greenways proposals fit in with their context. So last slide, please. So just to summarise very quickly, the character framework is all about understanding the context in which our greenways will travel through. The spatial strategy is about how best we plan for those and create a network for delivering enhancements. And then the design code is about how they're actually applied in detail onto the routes. This is a reasonably high-level strategy, and the intention is that this is the top-down element, and then the bottom-up element of the route-by-route design will take this on board and deliver the actual enhancements themselves. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. The way you described your report, Thomas, is the way I would like to divide up our discussion of it. So first of all, to focus on the blue infrastructure strategy, which has just been talked about. I think we need to focus on that initially, and then we've got the two pieces of design of specific greenways to talk about. So the two elements of the Comberton Greenway and then the update on the Barton Village Greenway. So if we can separate our comments accordingly, could I ask for contributions on the green and blue strategy, please? Katie? Paul? Go ahead, Katie.
This is a public meeting and it may be being watched by many, many people, who knows. But I think it would be really good if blue and green infrastructure could be explained in plain English. And then my specific question is the design code that you've been developing, has that been or will it be reviewed by Active Travel England? Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Paul?
Yes, thank you. I have a question, a comment and then a question. So my comment is, in principle, I support the blue and green infrastructure strategy. I'd like to provide an example of why I think it is important and how it could have benefited another scheme. So this scheme is the Mere Way, which is not a greenway and is not a GCP project. It's recently been constructed to provide an active travel link between Waterbeach, Newtown and Cambridge. It was a very green rural byway, and by that I mean you really needed some good walking boots to go down it in the winter, or be a skilled mountain biker. It was very green, and it has been transformed. I support the active travel scheme. It is needed, but it has considerably changed the character of the byway, which is an extension of the historic Aikman Street, and it is lined with hedgerows and woodland along its length on both sides. Some, including Landbridge Parish Council, have been very concerned about how much it has changed the character and how much it's been transformed. And I do think some guidance for the designers of the scheme could have helped to construct it more sensitively, both with respect to historic and the natural environment. So kind of what I'm hoping with this strategy is that it has that kind of impact, that schemes that come forward that are transforming their environment, from especially in the rural areas, from a very rural environment, take great care to try and maintain that environment as much as possible. So that's kind of how I hope this strategy will help. My question is about whether we can include something else in this, which is there have been significant problems, and it's growing, seems to be growing, emerging problem on the existing busway path and on the new Mere Way of illegal use of motor vehicles on these particular routes. And I wondered if in the design code we could include something about that. Because unless we stop these illegal incursions from happening, people are not going to be safe on these routes. And it seems to be a growing problem, and I've witnessed it a lot myself. So yes, if it's possible to include that in the design code, perhaps. Whether this is the right thing for that, the right forum for this, or the right place for this, I don't know, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Thank you. Claire?
Yes, I'd just like a couple of examples on how these strategies are going to help harmonise the different appearance of a greenway as it moves from semi-rural into an urban area. Obviously, it's going to be doing different things and looking different. And how will you know that it's a greenway all along the route? Will these strategies help that?
Thank you. Would you like to comment on those points so far from Katie, Paul and Claire?
I'll ask Joe to give the definition of green and blue in a second, because he's probably better placed than I am. Just in terms of Active Travel England, no, they haven't. However, we have already kind of consulted with Shared Planning Service, our own Landscape Heritage and Environment Forum, and our Active Travel, our non-motorised user group. And we're quite happy to add this to Active Travel England as well. In terms of the comments that Councillor Bearpark made, yes, that's exactly what it's trying to achieve, is to make sure that the designs that we are doing are sympathetic to the environment that they're going through. And that's why we've done so much work on this, because we recognise that with 150 kilometres worth of greenways, they don't all run through the same type of area. And that's exactly what this, the various documents go into. In terms of including other things in terms of illegal access and things like that, we can take that away and look at it, but I also think that's a part of the Active Travel Design Guide that the County Council has, which I know they are looking to update. And I will also talk to county staff with regards to that. And then just lastly, in terms of kind of how it's going to feel like a greenway. So we do have, for example, a wayfinding strategy, which is going to be consistent throughout the whole of the network, which is being developed at the moment, following decisions that have already been made on the kind of high-level design. So there will be that in place, but we will also be looking at things like consistency on gateways and things like that, so that you know where you are and that you are on a greenways route. So there will be levels of consistency whilst recognising that it goes through different types of environments. Thank you.
Joe, you're going to talk about
I'm going to
what it's called.
Have a go at defining it in layman's terms. So you have, well, primarily you have three different types of infrastructure. We've got grey infrastructure, which we all know as tarmac roads, green, which is our trees, grass, wildlife, blue, which is our waterway, drainage and suds. So ideally you would have all three in the same strategy, but the way this has developed over time and the way policies emerged is that obviously the grey infrastructure has been considered long before the green bits came in recently. So this is to address that shortfall, hopefully going forwards. If this started again today, if we had the city funding deal today, we'd have a combined strategy which would take everything into consideration. But because it went so far just with the grey infrastructure, this is a bit of a catch-up on that. So it's, very simply, it's everything that isn't our tarmac or roads, hard surfaces, if that's enough.
Thanks very much. I wanted to make a comment myself. I mean, I was quite impressed by what I've seen of this strategy. I get it, the way it's been put together and the way it's sort of trying to enhance the differences along the different types of landscapes that the routes are taken through. I was particularly interested, though, in the relationship between this and other discussions that we've had at different times about biodiversity net gain. So we've had two discussions about this, broadly speaking. One is how much of net gain, and I think the consensus was the more the better, but the other was where. I think the reports that we've seen in the past have represented a sort of tension between on-site and somewhere else, where it can maybe happen at scale. I must admit, I've always, by disposition, been more about more in support of on-site solutions. But I understand there are some very respectable arguments for sort of aggregating biodiversity net gain and doing it somewhere else entirely. So how does this strategy fit with that sort of equation? I mean, you have talked about protecting the biodiversity and enhancing the biodiversity, but it would be nice to know how you thought that fitted into the sort of on-site, off-site issue, because if an approach was still, well, we'll take it all somewhere else, then the enhancement sort of dries up a bit.
Do you mind if I come back on that one? So in terms of where we are with biodiversity across the programme, is that we're looking to bring back a kind of biodiversity strategy for the whole programme in March. We have already committed to 20% across the programme of biodiversity net gain and 10% within projects. The link between the two is that this generates and has reviewed opportunities for biodiversity net gain for the individual greenways. So it maps out where those opportunities are and how that would connect to bigger things like the Cambridgeshire Nature Recovery Network. And it's kind of overlaid the two with a number of kind of maps and things like that. And again, that's been part of what we've done working closely with the Shared Planning Service. So this doesn't set out a kind of new strategy related to biodiversity net gain, but what it does do is highlight opportunities along each of the routes for where the designers might look to deliver that biodiversity net gain to increase its effectiveness. But as I said, there is a wider strategy on biodiversity net gain that's going to be coming back. Where we are at the moment is doing all those biodiversity net gain calculations within detail of each project, so we know where we are as a programme, and that will be coming back later this financial year.
Okay, that's a good answer. I guess I would be hoping then that when we talk about it as a focused subject, we could talk about how we know what the decision is about the split between on-site and off-site, because I think it would be interesting. Okay, sorry about monopolising there, but are there any other contributions on the strategy? Neil.
The blue infrastructure, and I'm really happy that we're looking at the way that water moves in the land. I have quite a few questions coming into me about water gardens and keeping water in the land for a longer time, not least to help replenish the chalk aquifers that we are rapidly depleting. And I wondered if that is part of the strategy. You know, we are experiencing extreme weather, and so also the ability to take some of that flood water and hold it for a little bit longer. The other question is about biodiversity. I know I've said this before, but biodiversity by itself doesn't say that much. The relationship between biodiversity and rewilding is, I think, important. You could just put in a whole bunch of species that are not supposed to be together and you end up with an increase in biodiversity, but it won't necessarily help with wildlife as such and resilience. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Any other contributions? Okay, well, I'm going to ask, Simon.
If there's going to be off-site BNG, then it would be useful for you to consult us on what particular locations you were thinking about doing that. Because there are some of these sites that have been authorised, some local, some not. It may be that there's some potential in the city as well. So it would be useful to, before we make a decision on that, to come back to us on what you might do with the off-site.
I see there are heightening expectations for your report in next year. Okay, I see no further contributions. Oh, there is one. Sorry, Claire, go ahead.
This may be a segue into the next part, for which I apologise, but there are 2 points I'd like to make. One is the red surfaces that we are putting down for cycleways seem to be the softest substance known to mankind and seem to crumble more quickly than any other surface. Professor Driscoll, who was the co-questioner recently, is in fact the Professor of Materials Science at Cambridge. I wonder if we may ask her for some suggestions on better asphalt colours like green or something. And my second point is that I agree with Professor Josephson, who did ask the question, that Adams Road does not need beautifying. It is a very tree-lined, beautiful place, unless it's for the biodiversity net gain. But I think it could be used elsewhere. The money could certainly be spent on some of the corners around that cycleway into town. There are some where speeding students and the likes of me come across quite badly in conflict there. Students like to go at 300 miles an hour around very small corners. Professor Josephson, who asked the question, won a Nobel Prize for something you may not know about in electronics called the Josephson Junction. So I would also propose naming the Adams Road corner Josephson Junction in respect to our questioner. I think we should take a good practice of listening to our questioners quite hard. And he has had a lifetime of cycling around Cambridge with others like Professor Brian Pippard, who have had very serious cycle accidents as well. So anything we can do to ameliorate some of the corners where students versus professors and the likes of me would be good. Thank you. I hope that is a segue to the next section.
Yes, Claire, you've nicely underlined that we finished the first segue, the first section. Thomas, could you comment on the non-Adams Road related elements of what we've just talked about there from Neil, Simon and Claire?
Just starting on biodiversity again, yes, happy to bring off-site locations as options back within the paper. In terms of the importance of rewilding, again, we'll look to, there are people with more expertise than I have, but we'll look to reflect that expertise in the paper. And then, I don't know if you want to come on the importance of blue infrastructure. Just very quickly, Jay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely essential. We all know the increased rainfall we're dealing with, and we all know that water is going to be a scarcer and more important resource as we move forward. So we are, within the greenways themselves, we are doing all we can. So we're introducing rain gardens, suds, swales where possible to hold the attenuation up. We're actively doing that on a number of schemes within the street. So it's some quite significant interventions to take what would just be positive drainage and turn it into attenuation within the street. So yeah, we're doing everything we can. Within that, there's obviously lots of opportunities potentially if we start looking off-site, what that might look like in terms of additional blue infrastructure for BNG as well. So there's lots of exciting things afoot potentially.
Sorry, okay, thank you very much for supporting that part of the discussion on the blue and green infrastructure. So where do we stand on that? I mean, I think that this is a step that we support. Didn't hear any voices the other way, and several voices expressing that. Is there anything else? I think we want to note that we're going to see the relationship between this and biodiversity net gain in a report next year, so those points don't appear to be lost. Is there anything else that we wanted to hang on to our support for this? Nothing in my notes indicated there was, so clean bill of health. So thanks very much. We'll go on to talk about then the two sections of the Comberton Greenway, which Claire has already taken us towards one of. Question, of course, on the Adams Road part of this as well. Are there any, so Claire, I think you were starting the ball rolling by saying you thought it was a bit much what was proposed there. Am I reflecting that right? Just to...
The red surface is not my favourite for cycling on. It breaks up. So is there something better? And do we need to beautify Adams Road, or should we spend the money more wisely on some of the other junctions and corners?
Okay. We'll come back and hear with the officers on that in a moment. Can I see some others? Sir Simon?
Yes, I've discussed the Adams Road proposals with one of the local councillors, Councillor Holloway. This has been the subject of consultation, and I think if residents in Adams Road were going to be against this, we would have heard from them. And his report back is that they're broadly in support. I think the proposal to widen the footways is really, really attractive, and I think removing the parking is also a very attractive proposal. It was mentioned that what was the rationale for this scheme, which was to better serve the outlying villages, but actually the greatest use will just come from people coming from Eddington and from the West Cambridge site. And the projections for people on the West Cambridge site are up to about 10,000 people when it's fully built out. And there is now a stage 2 development emerging for Eddington, which will probably take the number of houses on Eddington up to several thousand. And this is a desire line route that's going to be heavily used. I think it's a very good idea to name a junction after Professor Josephson. After all, Claire's got a university named after her, so why not? I think that's good, but I do support her concern that there are other pinch points on this route once you go along in through to the University Library. So we're going to have these high levels of traffic. That one is actually perhaps one of the most difficult sections because you do get a conflict between pedestrians and fast-moving students, professors and consultants.
Thanks, Simon. Any others? I suppose the question that's presupposed by Simon is the University Library stretch part of this project or not? I think I know the answer to that. So would you like to... No one's... Before you come back, Tom, if we've had no comments on the other segment of the Comberton Greenway. No one else has commented on that. There were no questions, so like we're going to working towards having no comments on that. But Adams Road, if you could just...
Yeah, so just starting on the red surfacing. So the point of the red surfacing is to make it clear that cyclists have priority down the middle. The choice of red surfacing is in line with what is around the rest of Cambridge, where it's clearly understood what red surfacing is for. So that's why the red surfacing is used, and that's what's kind of approved by the county council. So that is what is planned. In terms of the kind of the use of landscaping and water gardens, Joe just touched a little bit on the rationale for some of that, and it does lead into the wider ambitions around biodiversity and such like. With all of the greenways. So that's with the removal of parking, it creates opportunities, and that's what we're looking to take, still within the budget, I should add, of of that section of the Greenway. In terms of just the feedback, we have met with residents groups and we've taken on board their comments in this design, which is good to hear that Councillor Holloway has fed that back. I'm just making sure I've covered everything. Have I covered everything? Was there anything further?
I guess you're saying the University Library stretch is outside, are you?
It is outside. However, what is within the scope of the Comberton Greenway is a section down Grange Road and then Sidgwick Avenue. And we are looking at the options along Sidgwick Avenue at the moment. We're hoping to bring back a little bit more detail on the plans for that. If you'll remember, we took a decision to withdraw the TRO that had been applied for down Sidgwick Avenue, which came to the last board, the one before, apologies, I can't remember. But the fact is we are looking at Sidgwick Avenue and Grange Road as a routing for the Comberton Greenway and improvements that we can make in those areas.
Okay, thank you. On this one still, okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
It hadn't occurred to me before, but it does now, the mention of the section past the University Library. It's incredibly dangerous. People are going very, very fast, and some people are concentrating going to the UL, and some people are concentrating on going further. And I think if, as a result of the success of the Greenway, which we hope it will be really successful, more people are cycling in, I accept that it will be, some cyclists will be funneled down Sidgwick Avenue, but it probably will bring more cycle traffic down that very dangerous route. So I think that we have to take that into account.
What's our approach to this? Karen, sorry.
No, I haven't got an answer, but I was just a related point was in my mind as well, in that transition into the sort of core of the centre, if we are bringing in, where do we see our responsibilities in that, and what, if any, consideration is being given to onward cycling or other types of active travel that are coming in through those routes? Where does our responsibility end, and are there any sort of quick wins to make some of that safer as well as people begin to use this?
Well summarised the views of quite a few. Katie?
I would really like to encourage the colleges to open up the straight routes through their grounds. For example, you could come down Clarkson Road, go across the playing fields and in through college there, and there's King's College. That's what I would like. Spread out the load
that's an idea
enjoy
of a
the
different
spaces
order.
we go through.
Well, thanks, Katie. So, I mean, Peter has,
if I may.
Peter has rapidly thought about this.
No. So picking up on Simon's point, West Cambridge, Cambridge West and Eddington, the cycling is coming anyway. Yeah? What we are trying to do at the end of this Greenway is to support that where we can. And we've identified a route down Adams Road, Grange Road, Sidgwick, which we would like to try and enhance and develop proposals and encourage people to use. But as we all know, cyclists, like pedestrians, flow like water, and they will pick whatever particular route they want. And it would be nice for us to sit here and say, yes, we can do more, and yes, we can do more, and yes, we can. There's a reality that says we can't do that. I think what we could reasonably do is we could take away to look at the route past the university library. And what I mean by look at is to identify what the issues and challenges might be, and whether there is anything within our auspices that we could, yeah? But what I'm not saying, just for clarity, is we will do it. Because the concept of mission creep on these things fills me with horror, because ultimately we then don't deliver. So we've identified a route that we will continue to work on, and Thomas and the team will work on. We'll have a look at the university library, and I know the route very well. There are a couple of particular pinch points, and off the top of my head, they don't appear easy to fix. But nevertheless, we'll have a little poke around, and we'll see where that takes us, and we will report back if that would be helpful.
Sure it would be, Peter. Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we say that we support these two competent greenway segments, and that we would record for the board our aspiration for future improvements on the University Library stretch. Yeah? And then you can have the rest of the argument with the board. Claire?
Just a small build on that. I would advocate spending slightly less on some of the things that have been suggested, including potentially in Coton. So you could spend slightly less on some things in order to free up a little bit of budget here. So I know you said, Thomas, that it was within your budget, but you could spend less than your budget.
I don't see how we can really say that at the same time as we support what's proposed. Yeah.
It's with the caveat, Chair, isn't it? It's an obvious thing, isn't it, to have a discussion with the university about actually bring a bag of money along to help solve the problem.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have one minor gripe about the about red surfacing, which I totally buy the reason why we would have it, but the problem is always where utilities come along and dig it up and patch it with non-red tarmac, making the most almighty pastiche ugliness out of road surfaces. And if there's a way of enforcing utilities to patch back with what they had dug away, would be great. Is that something that you could take a look at?
Very happy to take that to the Highways Authority.
Thank you. Okay, well, I've got the caveat, and so let's move to the next part of this, which was the Barton Village ones. I've heard no questions or comments about this. If anyone has any, please indicate. Otherwise, I think we will just really have to note this and let that go forward to the board. Thank you. Last item then is the quarterly progress report. Thank you both. The quarterly progress reports on your agenda from page 51 to 92. It's going to be introduced by Niamh. There aren't questions on this, so we'll have Niamh's presentation, and then I'll divide up the discussion according to the sections in it. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And just to introduce, you know Thomas already, you've just met him. And we've got Sarah Hayward from the County Finance team here alongside us as well. So this is your regular kind of every meeting cycle report. You'll all be familiar with it. There's nothing particularly remarkable in this report. So happy to take any questions, but just to highlight the things we're asking for, what we propose to ask the board in any case. So the first is around signing off gateway papers, and what we're proposing is that you do the same as you did last time, in that you delegate responsibility to sign those papers off to Peter and to the chair of the board, which, as I said, is what we did last time. We want to change the assurance framework based on some officer changes, so again, just your oversight around that. And then the last 2 points around the budget, so just some tidying up, so to sort of accept the CSETS funding from government that you heard about in the earlier item into your budget, and to accept 1.3 million that Dan might want to talk about shortly into the SMART programme as a result of some kind of restructure around the connector project. So all good news on those last two items. I'll let the chair run through each section, and we'll take any questions that the Joint Assembly have. Thanks.
Thanks, Niamh. I'm going to suggest that the points on which the board is going to make a decision, which are the hyphenated points at the beginning of the report, we actually cover those at the end. They're mainly process administrative issues, and go through the remainder of the report first. And just so that we don't end up talking randomly across each other, I'm going to suggest that we first give an opportunity to ask anything, say anything about the Gateway Review. Are there any comments on that? No? I'm sorry, Claire Daunton?
I have just two questions, which actually a resident who's read the report very carefully raised with me, so if I could raise those on his behalf. At 3.4, there's a mention of a report to MHCLG. Is there going to be a link to that report or subsequent reports, if you could perhaps let us know about that? And then there's a mention in the next paragraph of the Chisholm Trail Phase 1. And the question is, has the GCP or county any reports on the actual usage of the Chisholm Trail Phase 1?
Yeah, I think the second part of that we're coming to a bit later. But if you would like to answer the first part of that now.
Sorry. Thanks, Claire. So yes, all those Gateway reports will be published, and we'll put them on the website as soon as they're published.
Sorry?
On the Chisholm Trail point.
Well, let's come back to the Chisholm Trail when we get to the transport section, and let's remember it. Help me. Which is, in fact, next, the transport work stream. So, questions on the transport work stream, which is paragraphs 4.2, 4.5, and also in Appendix 1. We've got one question about Chisholm Trail, part of that. Are there any other points people want to ask? Annika.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be raising 2 points or 2 questions, but they are interlinked. Regarding the forecast dates on the report and using the St Ives Greenway as an example, given land acquisition issues and timescales needed to resolve such matters, how realistic are the current forecast dates, especially for red and amber projects? I know Cottenham Parish Council are disappointed with the delays in the St Ives Greenway between Westwick and Cottenham. The original completion date was 2023, it's now scheduled for 2025. However, we do still know there are land acquisition issues and they are ongoing. While Parish Council members appreciate there's challenges, they don't understand why greater progress hasn't been made or understand whether it relates to resources and stuff. So could such difficulties, such as land acquisition, have been preempted, especially when you've got sections with so many landowners? And would they then be able to inform better forecast dates? And interlinked with this, obviously we know projects change and things come up. So the projects with a red status get information as to what issues have arisen. Could the amber projects also have such information included in the quarterly progress reports? It just again indicates that communication is key, especially when delays arise. And then if this communication could also be forwarded to local members and parishes at the points that these happen or at the quarterly review points, it just informs expectation on some of these projects, I think. I would like to comment, though, that the Parish Council has been contacted by the officer for the Greenways, so we're grateful for this, just to note that as well.
Thank you, Annika. Paul.
Yes, thank you. I have a question just about the finance overview in Table 1, which is for this financial year. So in the column which is to June, comparing that with the outturn, the spend to date just seems in a lot of areas just to be surprisingly low. But the problem, there's lots of reasons for a lot of them, but across the board, I mean, an example is Waterbeach to Cambridge, which had spent 284k versus 2.5 million. Greenways was on 1 million versus 21 million. And Hills Road, 35k versus 1.5 million. Just seems generally that the reported spend to June was not on track for the outturn for the end of the year.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to ask, obviously, I think we've got to give them a blend of different types of questions here. So I think Claire's question was about the monitoring success criteria for the first stage of Chisholm Trail, if I summarise that right.
Thanks, Chair. We'll share a couple of the questions between, if that's okay. Yes, there is some data, and yes, we can share it. on the Chisholm Trail Phase 1? Yep, we will. Yeah, we'll work that out. And a couple of second points. Thanks for raising the point the officer has contacted the parish council. That's good news. On the broader land acquisition point, Thomas has probably got a couple of points to add, I think.
So with regards to Oakington, Scotland, so we have a large number of landowners, and the majority of them are now in agreement. So we're just working on those last couple to get into a place where we can move forward. Now, it's a bit of an iterative process, so the design is carrying on and is commissioned and is being worked on, and then clearly that defines the red line. So we have to keep going round to make sure that landowners understand if there are slight, changes for drainage or something like that. But the scheme does continue to progress and has made significant progress. I think it's in that place where maybe not a lot is seen. So hopefully through the discussions with the parish, Kerry as the project manager can enlighten them. In terms of the date of 2025, that is still our ambition. But it's amber because, ultimately there is the risk that sits with land ownership. And, that is a risk across the programme. And it's highlighted as one of the major risks across the entire programme. We will continue to keep you updated.
Could the AMBER projects actually be in the quarterly review, though, just so that then we've got some more information? Thank you.
Yes, we'll sort that out.
And then the question about the spending profiles.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Paul. So I think you picked up that, so you should have seen these reports in June. So we are a good few months beyond what they're presenting, and as a result of the pre-election period, we moved this meeting. So your update in October, November will reflect more accurately where the expenditure is. Hope that's clear.
Thank you. I was just wondering whether you could illuminate just a little bit more this question of compulsory purchase, because people have the sense that it's a power that is at our disposal, but what little insight I have into this is that it's a heavily qualified power, which makes it difficult to just kind of march in and say, here, we're buying that. Is that right, or ought it to be that simple?
I might defer to my colleague on that point.
So we have kind of legal personnel helping us throughout the greenways, and as we've kind of highlighted before, we're looking to use Section 26 processes in terms of acquiring the rights over the land that we need. But in order to go into that process, we have to have demonstrated that we've had sufficient negotiations with landowners. So there is quite a big process that you have to go through before you can enter into the actual legal processes. We have land agents, CBRE and legal teams working on that right now across the whole Greenways network. And, the requirements are becoming a lot clearer where we will require Section 26. But it also is costly. So it's favourable to avoid them if we can.
Katie, and then Neil.
I don't know. Anyway, I think the Chisholm Trail has been astonishingly successful. But I just think that when you think about our transport highway hierarchy with walking at the top, I think it could have been even better with some benches along the way, because I know a lot of people who would walk there more if they could rest occasionally. And I just think that, I've raised this before, but going forward, I think the active travel routes with a few benches would be even more successful.
Thank you. Neil?
I'm going to ask a bit of a more of a nebulous question. I wonder what effect the new government is likely to have on the programme. I note on, page 56, some of the risks with gaining funding and that sort of thing. The sense I get, at least from highway transport matters, the new government seems more supportive of the kind of things that we're likely to do. Actually, on compulsory land purchases, it looks like they're going to make things easier as well. So do we have any idea yet what the effect on the programme will be?
Thanks, Neil. So they haven't been in that long. But I think that certainly the test that we're all shooting for is around unlocking that final tranche of funding for the whole programme. We're on track in terms of what we need to do to do that, and we still have very good engagement, certainly with the civil servants and the relevant teams who are building that those series of briefings for ministers.
Thanks, Niamh. I'm going to move to the next work stream. I see no more hands on transport. That's skills, paragraph 4.6, and also covered in Appendix 2 from page 65. Are there any comments on the skills work stream? There don't have to be. If you're all happy with that, and you sound to be. So let's go to the next one, which is the smart work stream, paragraphs 4.7, 4.8, and pages 71 to 74. This is where we're being asked to recognise some income. Are there any questions about that apart from pleasure? No comments about, no questions. Okay. We then come to the
Just
housing
say well
one.
done to the team, obviously, since Dan's sitting in the corner waiting for us to say well done.
Well, I thought the pleasure probably did that, but yeah, thank you. The housing work stream, Appendix 4 and paragraph 4.9. Okay. And the economy and environment work stream, paragraphs 4.10, 4.15, and Appendix 5. No. Okay, that's fine. So let's just go back to those decisions that the board are going to be invited to take, which Niamh outlined at the beginning, and I characterised as mainly administrative, given what we've heard through other reports. Are there any issues with those? They all sound quite straightforward and common sense. I'm not sure, you haven't highlighted other options, so I assume they're all quite necessary. I think that's we've covered. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And I think we've come to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, everyone. Kristen, sorry.
I just wanted to highlight, in answer to Councillor Neil Slatter's question, to highlight Matthew Pennycook's recent letter to the leaders of our local government as something that's probably the best signal we've had as a community of what the government's intentions are for the area. If you haven't seen that, it's available on his government website.
Indeed, yes. Very good point. Thank you. So I think thanking everyone, officers, members, very much for their contributions today, noting that the next meeting we have comes around rather quickly now because this is a concertina. We didn't get time off because we were doing other things. So the next meeting is on the 16th of October, and it'll be in Camborne. So hope to see everyone there. Thank you for today.